Today we're talking to a guy that started his entrepreneurial career by buying sneakers in his high school bathroom and then flipping them for a profit.
I'd leave class 15 minutes after it started in the morning, go to the bathroom, spend 10 minutes trying to get some sneakers and then go back to class. And so I was buying them all online, shipping them into my room, and then selling them on eBay.
He also talked about how he got over the roadblock of not having experience in sales, but he gained confidence.
You don't need to be someone specific. Like the simple fact that you think you're confident makes you confident. Where did the confidence come from? I don't know, dude.
And he has a lot to say of how you are in charge of your destiny and ultimately getting exactly what you deserve.
Where you're at in life and what you have is exactly what you deserve. Like if you deserve to make 10K a month, you'd already be making 10K a month. Or if you deserve to be making 30K a month, you'd already be making 30K a month.
All that coming up in today's episode of the Remote Closing Academy podcast.
How's the week going, man?
Dude, the week's going awesome. I actually just had a close with a crypto payment, so that's fun. It's been going well. How's yours?
Sweet, dude. It's good. Yeah, I remember seeing some of the first, probably like a year and a half ago, like crypto payments were coming in like crazy. It was just people are pulling out of that and investing into their future, we'll say. So, dude, I think we have a lot of stuff to talk about. So I do want to jump into it before we get into the nitty gritty and talk about the specifics of remote closing. Just take us back as far as you want. I know you were in college, but even if you want to go before that, like what kind of jobs have you had in the past? I know you're super young, so it's not like we're going too far back, but just as far as you want to go back.
Yeah, we'll go back and we'll go quickly at the beginning. But in 9th grade, I got into selling sneakers online. So that was in high school. I was doing that for like 3 or 4 years. That was kind of like my first introduction into the online space. And I wasn't making $1 million, but I was making decent money, at least what I thought back then.
Yeah.
And then around the end of my senior year in high school, I went to a networking event and I met someone who said he was buying and selling businesses. And I thought, wow, this is the coolest job in the whole world. Sign me up, dude. And so I said, I want to work for you for free. And so I got a job with him. Fast forward like a month after that, I was on a call with RCA, right? So we had all this stuff going on. I was looking at going to college. All this stuff was going on. And ends up, I joined RCA. Over the summer, I'm like, oh, sales. This is the thing. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And then I end up choosing to go to college in Amsterdam. And I'm from Arizona. So it's pretty far away. There's a lot of stuff going on. And at that same time, the job I was working for, it was the e-commerce buying and selling businesses. They changed it from an internship into a paid job. And I was like, oh, sweet. I can help pay for college, all this kind of stuff. And so I kind of put sales on the back burner. Right. And then I'm not sure how far you want to take this before you ask some questions, but a couple months later, I realized, e-com, I don't know, kind of going back and forth again. I had a dude who, honestly, I kind of credit him with getting me back on track from RCA. He reached out to me, was like, dude, where are we at? What's going on? And we jumped on a call. And after 30 minutes, I was like, this guy's right. Like I've invested in RCA. Sales is the path for me. It lines up with what I want. Like I need to do this. And it still took me another like 2 months before I actually got onto my first offer. But
nice.
We'll start with that.
Yeah. And I do want to go back through some of those things because I think there's a lot that we can pull from, and just like I'm just curious of your experiences on what you learned. So what was I know you said in 9th grade you'd started to sell sneakers and stuff. Like what was your process with that? Like obviously you're in school, so were you like going to garage sales, were you buying them online, and where were you, like what was that whole experience?
Yeah, so I knew nothing going in. I had a friend who was doing it in class, and I was just happened to be sitting next to him. I was like, dude, what are you doing? Like he's like, oh, I'm about to make like $200, just watch. And so he enters the draw. If anyone's familiar with how sneakers release, it's a time, it's like 8 a.m. in the morning. There's a limited edition. They all release and then go. And so for the next 3 years after that, I would leave class 15 minutes after it started in the morning, go to the bathroom, spend 10 minutes trying to get some sneakers and then go back to class. And so I was buying them all online, shipping them into my room or into my house, and then selling them on eBay, for example.
Nice. And dude, that's so funny. It's just like, that's why I asked, because it's really interesting. There's I don't know if you know Noor. He's like, it's spelled Nour. He's kind of like one of the OG, like he was probably like the fourth person in RCA, like when it started in
Wow.
2020. Yeah. But he has a very similar story of like I met him when he was like 15, 16. And that might sound weird, but he wanted to be in one of our initial programs, the one that Brian was a part of. And he was in his school, and he was flipping candy basically. Like he would just he would go to like Walmart. He would buy big packs of candy for like, $10. And then they had 25 pieces in it. He would go to school, sell it. And then like, basically at 15, he was like hiring people at the school to like hide the candy. So back to your story, it's like, it's interesting. Like, if it doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, like if you want to make stuff happen, you will leave to the bathroom, for example, and pre-order sneakers and get them shipped. That's the definition of the hustle being born early. So, on like, was the, have your parents ever been like entrepreneurial or having their own businesses, like, or was it just the person next to you that was like, hey, I'm making this money, and that's how you jumped into it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my mom actually has her own business. She's a videographer. It's just her. So it's a little bit more like freelance kind of stuff. I never actually made that connection until you just asked that question. But no, it was really like that was the start. Seeing a friend, and then slowly like somehow learn that podcasts were a thing and listen to some podcasts. You see some YouTube videos here and there, and someone recommends you a book, and it all was very slow.
Yeah. And then to that, to that person that you were learning from, another thing that you said, that you kind of like, you learned early that there's a lot of benefit in learning from somebody and not expecting a return. And, when you ask that person like, hey, like, can I work for you for free? So, I guess, where did you get that idea or mindset? Cause I think that's genius. I've done that in almost every like avenue that I've gone into. And then what were some of like the takeaways or things that you learned in that experience?
Yeah, good question. I think maybe my dad had mentioned that to me at some point. I'd had an internship before that, so I kind of knew the deal. He worked for free. Takeaways from that process. So I actually got on an interview with them, and they told me, hey, go read Rich Dad Poor Dad over the weekend, and we'll talk on Monday. And so I had like one day to Amazon Prime it and like 2 days to read it. So I was like reading it all weekend. And a lot of people say that's an awesome book. I think it's great. I don't think it was like the life-changing book for me, but I think it kind of set me up on the path of like, this is going to be something that, this job is going to be something that things are going to be different. Like I'm learning a new kind of mindset, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that book, it definitely opens up people's mind. I agree. It's like, I think a lot of people present it as like revolutionary, but I think if that's like the first book that you read that kind of like, that gets yourself introduced to like, there's two different mindsets, and one is for growth, and one is like where 99% of other people are. I do think that it's a stepping stone. You learn a lot of good stuff from that. So you're working with this company, and I guess what was because I think a lot of people in your situation, if they're in high school or going to college or whatever, what was like your parents' thoughts on this stuff? Because you've mentioned both of them, and it seems like you might have a decent relationship with them. Like, were they supportive of it? Were they skeptical? Like, what was kind of that of like what you were doing online, and then like the remote closing stuff? Like, do they know a lot about that? Like, what's all that?
Yeah. So the first time I bought sneakers, I had to beg my dad to use his credit card. I was like, Dad, I promise you make money. He's like, dude, I don't know, man. This looks pretty crazy. Like it was like a moon boot. It was like $400. It was crazy. And I was like, Dad, I promise. Like, I promise to make money. I just need a credit card.
Yeah.
So he had me put together a spreadsheet. I eventually convinced him. So that was like the start. And so they slowly started warming up to it. And then when it came to RCA, actually, I'm a fairly independent person from them. And so I never even talked to them about it. Like later on, I told them like, hey, when you hear me talking, I'm doing practice calls, I'm doing mock calls, like not just talking to myself. But no, I made that decision on my own. I had, some money saved up from things that I'd done. And so, yeah, that was kind of
cool.
that.
Yeah. I'm always just curious because we had someone on, Daniel, that it was not necessarily the opposite, but it's like his family was like always like kind of like up his butt a little bit.
Yeah.
And they were like, what are you doing? Like, where's your money going? And like, obviously that's a different dynamic, but now I'm always just curious because, my parents, I think my parents are very, very similar to kind of what you said is, from an early age, like there was so many, like, I uploaded one of my first YouTube videos when I was like 10. And 2 years later, like one of them like popped off, and I got an email from Google when I was like 13, 14. And so I guess eighth, ninth grade. And they sent me an email and they're like, hey, we want to pay you for the views you're getting on your YouTube video. So I had to go to my dad and be like, hey, this isn't a scam. I swear it's going to connect to your bank account. They're going to like send you, like, they're going to send money. And then just like, after that, I think it was just like, year after year after year, as I was like testing new things and uploading videos on YouTube. And, it's like, kind of like you said, they warmed up to the idea and they got a little bit more comfortable with like knowing like, okay, this internet stuff like isn't, a scam. You know what I mean? Okay. So you jump into, so I guess, how did you find RCA in the first place? Like what was it, an ad? Was it a video? Like what got you introduced to remote closing as a concept?
Yeah. So I've heard some funny stories on the podcast. Mine was like, I just kept seeing this dude pop up in my YouTube, ad. And I was like, after a while, I was like, all right, I just need to watch the rest of this and like see what this is about. Like, it sounds kind of interesting. And I was someone who never clicked on an ad before, right? I was just like, oh, come on, just skip. But one day I was like, all right, I'm going to watch this. And so I watched it all the way through. I like clicked on it, I booked a call, and then it was the rest was history.
Really?
Yeah.
So there wasn't really any pushback. You're just like, all right, let's do it.
I was pushing back a little bit on like this was bigger than anything I'd ever, I never invested in a course before for training or anything like that. Like I never invested in myself. So I think there was that leap to make. Yeah.
Okay. And then what was, your ramp up period, or maybe not even ramp up period, but just like, I guess, initial thoughts, right? Like what did like the first week for you look like? And because in that time, at that point, so you were still in college and you saw that job, right? When you jumped into RCA? So
I was just about to graduate from my senior year.
Okay.
So I like 3 weeks left. So my initial weeks, I would be in class and it would be like, study time, and I would be like earbuds in, like on my iPad, like watching the trainings on like 2x speed, like nobody talked to me. Like, I'm watching nobody understood. Like I didn't tell anyone what it was. So that was the first couple of weeks of just like watching it. And I was someone who was super, super nervous to like do my first mock. And so it took some working up to that. And I realized that the stressing about it is the stressful part. Actually doing it's not too bad. Like you just got to get over.
Is there any like tips you'd give to someone, like stuff that helped you? Because I think that's from just looking at the groups and looking at surveys and things like that, I think that's a big, with anything, right? It's like the hardest part is taking that first step, right? It's like it's one thing to listen to the content, but it's the next thing to like jump into mock call, and it's next thing to start self-sourcing. So was there any like anything that helped you specifically to like bite the bullet, jump into mock and make it happen?
Yeah. I think it was someone who kind of was like, hey dude, like I understand, but like we got to do this. And I was like, okay. Okay. So I would actually encourage anyone who's in RCA and you see someone who's their first time to help someone out. Just, be understanding and walk them through it, but challenge them, don't let them, it's like someone's climbing to the top of a 12-foot diving board, and they get to the top and they wanted you to come with them, so you went up with them and they like go out to the edge and like, you know what, I'm not going to do it. Like if you're a good friend and you're like, no dude, like you're jumping off,
Yeah.
So, and then what can people do is I would say just realign yourself with the reason that you did this. Like you didn't do this to be easy. You didn't do this because it was easy. And growth happens outside your comfort zone, right? Like there's this excellent maxim. I think it's by Chris Voss. He says like awkwardness is accelerated learning, or being uncomfortable is accelerated learning. And so I remind myself of that all the time. Like, I think it's super important.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, talk about that. It's like I think there's this direct quote. It's like the growth is on the opposite side of being uncomfortable, right? And then once you can get comfortable with being uncomfortable, that's when true growth happens, because you're always like striving to make yourself uncomfortable, but then also like feel comfortable in that
Right.
in that spot. Yeah, one of my old door-to-door mentors, I did door-to-door for like 6 months, and I like hated my life. So, but I learned a lot of stuff through that process.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was like the timeline? Because I know you said that you jumped to RCA, and then you were kind of doing like the e-com stuff, and then you came back. So what was like, I guess maybe what was the reasoning for that? Was it like, did you feel like a different opportunity was better? What was the reason that you think that you kind of like put remote closing a little bit on like the back burner?
Yeah. I think it was like I had one right in front of me. They're like, hey, dude, we want to pay you. And the other one was like, I had to go get it. And so I think that might have been a little bit of that. And it was just so much change going on. I was moving across the world. I was going to have to figure out, do I find a job here? Do I do one back in the States? Which for anyone listening is outside the U.S., it's totally possible. You can find a job where you're at. You can find one in the U.S. It's possible. But it was kind of just like a lot of things going on at once.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing to kind of just like be aware of, because I think almost everyone that joins in remote closing is going to be in some sort of that, right? It's going to be they're in school and they prioritize school over that, right? Or they are in a 9-to-5 job and like that's paying the bills, this other thing isn't, right? And if they put more time to that, then they're going to make the money. So I think just a thing to keep in mind is there's a lot to say about like focus and priority, right? And whatever you prioritize is going to grow, right? So I mean, you realize when you had that conversation with the person, it's like, okay, I need to prioritize this because this could be the end goal, as opposed to, I don't know what the growth trajectory looked like in the other opportunity, but a lot of times like remote closing, you're going to get a lot more upside for not as much risk, or, I wouldn't say it's no work, because it is obviously, but you know what I mean? It's like, you just have to figure out what you're going to prioritize. So I guess what was like the light bulb switch in that conversation with the person that you had that got you back on track? I know you kind of touched on it, but like, what was like what got you back on it?
Yeah. It was him kind of just asking me again, when I got on that first call, obviously I need to know why. Like, why do I want to do sales? Like, why did I even get on this call? And sometimes you don't know, but that's a good closer job, is to help you figure that out, right? Like, to help you in that process. And so he kind of did that again for me. Like, dude, why are we here? Like, what are your ultimate goals? Like, how does sales fit into all of that? Like, dude, you invested in yourself like 6 months ago and you've done nothing with that. Like, why? Like, a little bit of guilt, but in a good way. I mean, like, dude, like, this is what you said you wanted. Like, I'm confused, man. Like, what's going on? Yeah, the light bulb moment was just me realizing, like, there was a reason why I wanted to do sales. Like, it tied to my bigger purpose. It was the path to get to where I wanted to go, like my mission in life.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm glad you made the switch back, because I think, and that's really the job of any closer, right? And even whether it's to buy a product or resell you on something you've already bought, right? It's super important. Anyone listening, if you're a closer, it's going to be your job, is you sell people, but then you also got to resell as to why, if, confidence dips, if momentum dips, whatever it may be, because at the end of the day, we're all humans, and humans have limiting beliefs and, all the negative stuff that comes with being human. So, okay. So you kind of come back on board a little bit. You realize, cool, remote closing, this is the way to go. What was the trajectory from that point, and then getting the offer? So any, action steps that you took? Was there a specific amount of like mock calls that you did to get ready for it? What did the outreach look like in terms of numbers and self-sourcing? Let's break that down.
Yeah. I'm going to give you an answer that maybe you're not as excited to hear, but
okay.
Actually through someone that I knew, through a friend. The funny thing is, it was the networking event that I first got that e-com job at almost a year before. The owner of that, he was looking to start a high ticket product. And we'd connected, we got along pretty well. And he knew I was kind of into sales. And so he messaged me like, hey, do you want to be a setter? And it took some time. And in those couple weeks, that's when I was getting back into it. I was starting to watch the training again. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much more that you go through it once and you learn stuff. You got to go through it again and again. You keep learning stuff. And so I did a handful of mocks to kind of get back into the rhythm of setting and what that looks like. And then, from there, started my first gig.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just going back to what you said initially of like, a thing, I wouldn't be excited about or as excited about the answer, but I think that just goes directly back to, I try to talk about this a lot is like, and as generic as it sounds, right? It's like your network is your net worth, right? Everyone says that, but it's like, but if you look at, like there's so many people that I think that they'll see an opportunity that comes up, but they're like too scared to take action with it. And they just like say no. Right. So you taking the action of flipping the sneakers, of working with the e-com store and like building those relationships, it's like now you've built up enough like credibility, or maybe not even credibility, just like trust, right, in other people to be like, okay, instead of going out and grinding and trying to do it the old fashioned way, how can I leverage the relationships that I've already made and then use that, to your advantage. Right. And I think there's so many, especially like where the world is going, statistically speaking, right? In 2026, I think it is this industry. I think this year would be like 100 billion, and it's like poised to be 300, 400 billion in the next couple of years. So it's like, and everyone wants to be a coach, and everyone wants to build a course, and everyone wants to like monetize their, what's the word? They want to monetize their knowledge, right? So if you can be the person that just like fully dives in, creates these networks, and then learns the most valuable skill of setting, closing, right? Getting people into these things, is you become like a weapon for a lot of these businesses. And let's say your brother-in-law wants to start a business. Well, guess what? Now you're a setter and closer. You can come in and like build that out. There's a lot of different things that come off of, having a network. So yeah, let's talk about that experience. What in that, I know you said you're with him for a couple of months. So I guess what was your experience, especially being like kind of building it out? Like what were the goods, the bads, the uglies?
Yeah. So it was definitely an interesting experience. I wouldn't say I fully knew what I was getting myself into. Not that it was terrible, but just that it was a lot different than what I thought. And so, yeah, I was, we had like a base script, but I had to revise it. And, I was taking from the RCA script and the teachings there and testing different stuff out and things like text messages and like processes and kind of thinking those throughout as well, which I'm someone who's I like processes and, steps. And so that was something that I enjoyed. And then, setting for the owner who was the closer. And one thing I want to say is that this time I was working maybe like 15, 20 hours a week. It was part-time because I was still in college. I was still working my other e-com job. I actually had I was doing a couple times a month going to this like startup in Amsterdam. Like, dude, I was trying to do everything.
Yeah, you're going crazy.
So yeah, that was kind of a little bit crazy. To kind of spoil how the ending is, this year my motto is literally like do less. Like that's my motto. Like now I do one thing. Like I do remote closing. But one thing I'll say is in those first couple weeks, like I got really scared to dial sometimes. Like it was not always easy. Especially because you're sitting in your house. You're alone. And someone just yelled at you or someone just hung up on you like 20 minutes ago. And so I kind of had to work through all of that and trying to do a million things and setting up the processes all at the same time. So I think it really helped me to become who I am today.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I'm noticing just through this conversation and like you kind of like taking initiative on that business, where do you think you got like the confidence and like the mindset to just take action? And where this comes from, I was listening to a podcast recently, and it was like a real estate investing podcast, and they were talking about when people start like real estate investing or starting their own business of any kind, is it's really difficult for people to transition from a W-2 mentality to a 1099 mentality. And what they meant was, when you're an employee, right, is you're being told what to do, right? And I think a lot of people are comfortable in not having to make decisions and just being told what to do and like doing the work. So what in your, like, I guess where does that confidence come from you? Because you said like, you had to build the processes, you had to take the stuff from RCA, you had to implement it for this business, you had to test. Like, where do you think that came from for you?
That's a good question. I don't know if I fully know the answer to that. I would say, like, in my mind, having confidence is what makes you confident. Like what I mean is, you don't need to be someone specific. Like, the simple fact that you think you're confident makes you confident. And so I was kind of just making it up. Like, where did the confidence come from? I don't know, dude. Like, I was just knew that this is what I had to do. And did I do it every time? No. Like, there were days when I would just, watch an hour of YouTube before I made that first call. But it kind of goes back to like realigning myself with like, why am I doing this? What is the purpose? And so getting really, really clear on like what I wanted from life was something that I think helped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just the definition of fake it till you make it. And I think that was a huge part for me too, that helped out a lot. Is I've always, like, my confident spot has always been like on camera and like making YouTube videos and stuff like that. So even when I had one of my first agencies, is I didn't actually, like, I knew what I was doing, but I didn't at the same time, right? Like, at a high level, I knew like the right actions to take, but I would like present myself as if I knew that I did. And then the feedback that other people gave to me saying like, oh my gosh, you're the best. That's what gave me the confidence, is because it validated what I was saying was like, actually, it was tangible for them, and it made sense. So, yeah. And I think, in your situation, and for everyone too, is it takes a certain amount of doing it and not being too afraid of what's going to happen, but then you see the results of what happens, and the positive thing, and then you get the positive reinforcement to continue to take those actions.
Yeah.
So that's huge. So I guess that trend. So you're with that company for a couple of months. I guess, what was the reason to part ways and transition into another opportunity?
Yeah, it was a little bit because of the time zone. So they were based 9 hours behind me. And so I became a closer with them. Right. And then the other thing was, and no hate to them, I love them. I still know the owner. I think he's awesome. It was kind of like my financial situation as well, being like, I need something that's proven, got a process. Like, I love building this stuff out, and if I had the time, I'd love to do it. But, he kind of starts to get a little bit of urgency, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing something for a couple months and you're not, not making what you think based on, the time that you can put into it, I completely get that. It's time to find something else. So how did you find that next opportunity? Self-sourcing, pipeline, like, what did it look like?
Yeah, so it was through the pipeline, through RCA.
Sweet. And obviously we won't talk about specific like company names or anything, but what was like the experience there? And because I know you transition out of there as well. So I guess, what were some of the, maybe like the learning lessons in there? Again, good, bad.
Yeah, I think that was another one where I wasn't the first closer, but I was the only closer aside from the owner. And it was more on my time zone, which is why I went with it. And I think a little bit of understanding the culture. So it was in the UK. I think that might have messed me up a little bit. I think another thing is, there is a difference between offers that have like 3 closers and an offer that has none. It doesn't mean that either of them are better than the other. You just need to know what you're looking for. And so I think my lesson learned there is, like, if you're someone who needs processes, it doesn't mean you should just look for a company who already has those processes, but you should keep that in mind as you are looking. Yeah.
What are some other things, just like in hindsight? Because, I want people listening to this to not, because I think, again, back to the point of just the other episodes that we've done, like most of the episodes, if we have 40 episodes, probably 35 of them are about people's stories of like landing a gig, right? But actually the last episode too, and with this one, is it's not the first gig that ends up working out. So I don't want people to get discouraged at like, oh, like I have to find a bunch of different opportunities. That's not it, right? It's like, it's the same thing with any job. Is you go into any job and sometimes it's going to work out, sometimes it's not, whether it's the culture, whether it's, like Camden said, the processes, whether it's just, the vibes. I don't know if that's a one that people look at, but what are maybe, I know you gave one tip, right, of what to look out for. What are maybe a couple other things in hindsight that you would give someone as a recommendation, like you should ask these questions on an interview, or you should understand these things before you move forward?
Yeah, 100%. You should do KPI math is what I like to call it. Like they're gonna give you a range. Hey, dude, if you hit KPI, you should make this between this. Always verify. Say, okay, let's do the backwards math of if I close this many deals, I make this much commission for each one. How many do I need to close, each day or each week, and what would my closing percentage need to be? So you can kind of backtrack from there. And then I always would recommend that you ask about like the marketing and lead flow side of things. Just get an understanding. Like use your own common sense to understand, like, is this something where they post a video once a month and have a bunch of leads from that, or is it like consistent? Are they paying for leads? Like, what's the situation? So I think those are two things that I would advise.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll add to that, and I forgot who it was that mentioned this, but I think this is a great thing too, is, well, two things. I think some people get intimidated when we say like, you should ask these questions, but understand that like as a closer, like you are also, I mean, you're an employee, but like you're 1099, like you should be treating it as your own business because you're basically in charge of what you bring in essentially. So, back to what you said is like, not only understanding like what is the KPI math, but I would also like even add of like, hey, if the team has closers, like what is your average closer making, right? What is your average setter making, right? Because like they could say, well, the income potential is like 15,000, right? But like that's the best closer. It has 15 years of experience. They've been in the offer for 10. Like there's a lot of different things like variables. So I would just like, what does your average closer make? And then even if they say 7, right, or 10 or whatever that is, you can kind of hedge against that and say like, okay, well, I'm kind of new, so probably not going to do 10, but might be able to do this. And then after 3 months, you can kind of reverse engineer and see if it's the right opportunity for you. Okay, so you transition out of that one, and then how'd you find the one that you're currently on now?
Pipeline again, dude. I wish I could get
pipeline
advice. Well, I don't have it,
dude. Yeah, no, and that's I don't think it's necessarily like discounting the story. I think it's cool to see like people that come in. They're like, I reached out to 500 companies, and I did like that's obviously a story in and of itself. But at the same time, like if you do what you've done and like take action and do a ton of mock calls and like really put that information forward and present yourself well and interview well, right? It's like we have 600 companies that need setters and closers. So it's like, if you're good, we're going to find a place for you every single time. So let's talk about that opportunity. How's it going so far? I know you said you're 4 weeks in, what's it been so far?
Yeah, dude, it's been awesome. I love the team. Super grateful that they gave me the opportunity to kind of come in and prove myself, right? Like I had some experience, but not a massive track record. I hadn't been in here for 2 years. And so to go back to what you're just saying about interviewing, like it's not like you want to get really good at interviewing. You just want to be authentically yourself. Like that's why they literally told me that, like, hey, dude, the reason that, we brought you on is because you weren't one of those people who was just good at interviewing. We just liked who you were. And even if you're not going to be the best closer right from the beginning, like you're part of the culture that we want to build. And, I know that you're going to be driven enough and smart enough to get the skills that you want. So that's kind of like the front end of that. And then how's it going, dude? It's going awesome. There's a ton of things that I need to work on, and I'm working on them every day. But I've had a handful of closes and some deposits, and so I'm super excited with how things have gone so far.
Sweet. What would you, if someone that's listening to this and they're planning to start like a new offer, or maybe even just like sourcing for an offer. What are just a couple of things, because you've gone through 3 at this point, what are some things that like you focus on within like the first week, or just like, call it the ramp up period, that has helped you just like get accustomed? Because, they've been different like offers, right? Like different, okay. So, when you're transitioning the offers and learning the material and things like that, like what's helped you, accustom yourself to the new offers?
Yeah, good question. So a handful of things. I'd say the first one is watching live calls that have closed, like of other closers. If you have multiple closers, and I've heard this from other coaches, like I would recommend you stick to one closer. Just watch all of their calls, understand their process and how they talk, so that you're not mixing a bunch of things together that you don't know if will match. The second thing is get really, really clear on who the customer archetypes or the customer avatars are. Like you want to know who you're going to be talking with. And even on this last offer, like I didn't do it as soon as I should have. But now that I have it, I feel like I have a huge advantage. and it's not like magic. Like you can just be like, oh, okay, this guy showed up and I just need to say this and this. Like it's more complicated than that, but it gives you a really, really good starting point, especially when, there's probably a little bit of nerves, a little bit of excitement in your first couple of weeks. And I think the most important thing is to just genuinely listen, just genuinely care, be genuinely curious. Like that'll take you farther than any scripts can. And I've learned that the hard way. I've stuck to the script too tightly, and I've had people tell me that I'm being too salesy, and I've missed deals that I probably should have closed. So I would say like it's kind of that detachment from the sale, like you're attaching yourself to the person. Like I've even started to use phrasing and words like, dude, I genuinely just want to see you win. Like whatever's best for you, that's what we're gonna do. So those are some things that I would think about when you're getting started in off.
Yeah, one thing that you just mentioned, but we were talking about before too, is like the archetypes. So if you can, I think just because obviously a lot of these interviews are like, about remote closing and like your story and stuff. Can you kind of break down like, what in your vision, like when you're trying to break down different archetypes, like number one, what does like archetype mean? And then what are like the different ones that people can kind of like look out for when they're on their calls?
Yeah. So I'll give you some that I've seen on my offer. Obviously it's going to be different for everyone. And I'm a process guy. I tend to go a little bit over the top, but this is what I've done. So I've made a big giant Google document. It's not big giant. I've made a decently sized Google document for each kind of person. I wrote out like, what does this person sound like? Typical phrases. What do they look like? What are their typical pain points? What are their goals? What are their limiting beliefs? Challenges and how you should talk to them, right? Because you have to talk to each person differently. I'll do like pre-pitch that you should typically do for this person, objections that they typically have, how they perform once they're in the program. So those are kind of the things that I focus on. To give you some examples, like I'll give you some that'll probably apply to most offers. You got like the hard-headed know-it-alls, people who got a little bit of ego, maybe the executive type who's coming in. They're the kind of people who will tell you like, oh, dude, come on. I know the process. Like, come on, dude. Come on. Just tell me what it is. Just tell me the price. This is what we were talking about earlier about how you gotta keep frame. And I'll go through a couple more and we can expand on them if you want. But you got like the golden handcuff people. They're making decent money. They're not doing terrible for themselves, but they just don't have the time. Like they're missing out on their kid's life, or they can't travel the world, or they don't have the flexibility that they want. I call these like the golden handcuff for the time people. I'll give you two more. You've got the super analytical people, engineers, analysts, data analysts, like anything like that. They'll want to like see proof, to get a little bit more tactical. Their typical objection is going to be trust. Dude, I just don't know if this is going to work for me. Like, can I see, I don't know, I just don't know.
Yeah.
And then one more, I'll do like the younger sibling is what I would call it. These are people who are just like, dude, I don't want to enter the rat race in the first place. They're a little bit younger. They want to, they've got these big dreams. They're watching the motivational videos on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. And those people, you got to believe in them, genuinely. You have to tell them those are a couple.
Yeah. I think that encompasses a lot of them. And a main thing I want people to, because I do want to expand on some of them, but as we do go a little bit deeper into this, guys, is I want you all to understand that sales is not easy, right? It's not an easy thing to do. However, like Camden's talking about, is like he's got a Google Doc written down of like these are the different people. So the thing is like two things that in my opinion are important. Number one is you understand the concepts. So you understand that there are different archetypes. And then number two is how to, at least where to find the information around how to handle those things, right? There's always going to be, I'm learning new things every single day, and I've been doing sales for 5 years, and that's not even a long amount of time. Like I have so much to learn, for the rest of my life in terms of sales. So as we go deeper on this, if you got to take out notes, like let's do that. So we won't go too deeper, but I would just be interested to see, okay, cool. We have these 4 archetypes. You call them. So, we have the super analytical ones, the golden handcuffs, the younger sibling, and then, the type A personality, like tell me the price. So let's go down those lines. How would you usually approach those personalities, and like what are like the traits of like, okay, I know that I have this archetype. How does the conversation usually go with those people?
Yeah. Which one do you want to start with?
Let's go in your order. So we'll start at the top with the just give me the price.
Okay. Just give me the price. And I will say I'm not an expert. I don't know everything on this. I'm learning just as we all are, as we go along this. So I'll just say what I've seen, what has worked for me, and we'll kind of go from there. But the people who just want to know the price, the most important thing you can do is keep frame. Like keep frame no matter what. And one thing that's really important I've noticed is if you believe that they are better than you, or they are making more money than you, or you should be listening to them, or you're impressed by them, or you think whatever amount of money they're making is a lot, it's going to be really hard to keep frame. And so you need to believe, even if it's not true, like as an example, I can believe that I'm in the shoes of my owner who makes like whatever, X amount more than I do, and who makes X amount more than these people do, and go from that frame of like, it doesn't matter if you're a neurosurgeon making $1 million a year, you are here for a reason. You need help. I'm the expert in my field and you are the expert in your field. And right now you're in my field. So if you don't want to talk, dude, like it's totally cool. We don't have to talk, we can get off the phone, but we've got a process for a reason. It works. Those are some kind of the things that you can say, but it's super, super important to keep frame. And you are asking the questions, right? Whoever asks the questions has the frame and has the leadership.
Yeah, that's good. And I think just my takeaway from that, or what I think people should take away, is like what you believe is going to dictate how you present yourself within the call, right? And like we were talking about before, is like I just love those people, because it's when I get someone on a call and they're like, just tell me the price, dude, whatever, is like my immediate job is to, how do I like take them down a couple pegs? And I get to like be, not be mean to the person, but my mission is to like, get them off that high ground and then be like, okay, so for example, if they're like, I'm already making $200,000 a year. I'm like, dude, that's it? Like, dude, I've talked to so many people that have like done way more than that. Like, what's like the actual problem that's going on? Like, why are we actually here? Right. As opposed to, I think a lot of people, the way that they handle that wrong is like, if you ask the finance question of like, hey, so like, cool, man. So just give me a breakdown, like, how's work right now? How's it going? And they're like, yeah, I'm doing this. And then, a lot of closers will be like, oh, that's good. That's pretty good. Right. You don't want to do that because you've just validated that they're good. They're fine.
Yeah, definitely.
hard stop. Okay, cool. So that's to handle that person, to recap, you can't let them win. They're in your court. You keep frame. You ask the questions that you need to. So golden handcuffs people, these are the ones that are they're making okay money. They're kind of decent, but they're not really able to live their life to the fullest. How do you handle that person?
So with these people, I've found it's really, really important to let them talk. Like, and don't just let them talk about random things, like guide them, like let them sit in the pain. Like, what are they missing out on? What are their goals that they're not reaching? Some people are going to be either trying to get out of their pain, or some people, they're going to be running towards something. Whatever it is, just like ask a lot of questions about that. Like some people you have to worry about, like do it yourself, and you need to tackle that in the solution. Like these people I found, just make sure the gap is super clear between where they're at and where they want to go, and let them talk about it, and they should basically sell themselves. Like they know they need it. You just need to get them to say it. So.
Okay, perfect. And I think that one's pretty straightforward. Is just building, and a lot of this is just building the gap, right? Like doesn't matter, Cole talks a lot about it, is like, figuring out, okay, what is their heaven island? What's their hell island? They're on hell island. You just got to build that bridge between. And the only way you build the bridge is by asking the right questions to then help them build that based on their needs, right? Or based on what they're looking for.
One thing to add on to that is like a lot of times these are people who will do a lot of research. Oh, dude, I've looked into so many things. And so it depends how advanced you are. But this is where you go into the pre-pitch and say like, dude, this is less about whether you want to do remote closing or whatever else you're selling. And are you actually committed to making change? And there's some awesome, phrases you can use. Things like, it's not about jumping off the cliff, because if you give yourself the choice to jump off a cliff or not, you're never going to jump. And you go more in depth in this, but it's like, dude, commit yourself to jumping off a cliff, and now just decide which cliff am I going to jump off? Which cliff has the best support for me and the most alignment with where I want to go? Because dude, wherever you come in that, you're going to find success. And so it's things like that, on like selling them on the idea of making a change and becoming 100% certain on that. Because a lot of times people don't buy, not because they aren't certain in us or you or the program. They don't buy because they're uncertain about making a change overall, right? They're uncertain about taking that leap.
Yeah. Yeah, that's big. And then, so that's the golden handcuffs. And then we have the analytical person, which in my head is kind of the same, but how would you handle that next person a little differently?
Yeah. And I'm not the best at this. This is someone who you need to kind of show them the numbers, like make it make sense to them logically. Like if you're like just waving your hands and saying it's all gonna be a bunch of magic, they're never gonna believe you. They're like, something suspicious is going on.
Yeah.
Says you're going off. So that's one, and you just need to like lay out a very clear path of how they would get there, and then just know that they're probably going to be a little bit scared. They probably haven't done anything like this before. Like you have to walk with them in that. And I like to think of it like, if you get to the end and they're giving you objections, but they said things that that they need to make a change. They said that. You kind of have to just like put your arm around them like a little friend and be like, look, dude, I get it. Like the glasses are on upside down. Let me fix them for you. Just gotta flip them over and now you can see. So you just kind of have to walk them along like a logical conclusion of, like I'll give you an example objection handle that I really like. It's like, everyone makes decisions from a place of current circumstance. The thing that's really hard to do is to make decisions from where we want to be. Like, for example, an overweight person is only overweight because they make the decisions that an overweight person makes, right? They have a fundamentally flawed decision-making process around health, fitness, nutrition, right? It's not until they make the decisions of a fit and healthy person that they can become a fit and healthy person. You're like, do you know what I mean? I'm like, yeah. It's like, dude, so if we know that to get to where you want to go, you have to make decisions like that person, fill in the blanks, what do you need to do? And he'll be like, man, I guess logically that makes sense. That's not like a Band-Aid, slap it on everyone and make work, but that's an example of what you can use.
Yeah. And I want to add one thing onto that is that's a great point is, I think when people usually think about sales, right, or objection handling is they think of like a Grant Cardone, like, okay, they say this, you say this, right? And it's not the case. And, sometimes that, that type of Grant Cardone line might work on like a specific personality type or a specific person, but it's not going to work every time. So it's like, you just want to look at these little things that, Camden's dropping here in terms of these like things that he's saying is these are just, these are things to add to your tool belt, right? These are just different things to say in each situation. The other thing before we get into the last archetype is that I think will be helpful for people is I think as we're talking about this and we're talking about archetypes, that might be like a hard thing to wrap your head around. One thing that's done to help me is you'll find, and this isn't 100%, but you'll find that there's like specific, even like specific jobs that people have that will almost like pre-place them in those positions. So for example, the analytical person, it's usually an engineer, right? Why? Because they just like live by spreadsheets and everything that they do is math. So the way that they make decisions is based on data and math. So, if you're talking to an engineer, it's usually that person, right? The type A people, usually like the business owners, the CEOs, right? Golden handcuffs, the ones that are, high up in companies like the project managers or, a CTO or a CFO, like those people that's, again, they're making good money, but they're working 20 hours a week, or I'm sorry, 20 hours a day. And then, okay, so the last one, and then, obviously the younger sibling. So someone that's probably doesn't have a job yet, a little bit younger, maybe still in college, right? Whatever it is. So how's the conversation with that person and how do you like identify?
Yeah. So first they're going to be young. They're probably going to be a little bit shy. They've probably tried some sort of online business before. Like when they're coming from this situation, they usually have this like feeling like, yeah, I'm someone who I think I can do it, but I don't know, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna give it my all. Like I really hope this works.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's the idea of a younger siblings. You have to talk to them like a younger sibling, even if they're older than you, right? Like just be like, you challenge them a little bit, but it's like, dude, like I believe in you. like genuinely from the bottom of my heart, I think if you do this, you can be really successful. And here's why, blah, 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 blah. That would be in the pre-pitch. And a lot of it comes down to like time versus money as well in the pre-pitch is a way I like to think about it. And I'm still in all these from AIM. So shout out to AIM, who was on another episode. Everyone should go listen to that. But you want to challenge them on like, can they do it themselves? You know, like, dude, you're young, you could probably get there and eventually, right? But what's more important, like time or money? Because if it's money, just save up your money and yeah, never get a mentor, dude. But if it's time, it's always going to make more sense to borrow someone else's expertise. And walking them through that of like getting them ready to make that decision of investing because they probably haven't before. It's a lot of mindset stuff that you have to go with them. Like you have to get them to believe in themselves.
So out of all of those, which one do you think you're best equipped to handle?
I think the golden handcuffs people for me personally, because I think for them I can.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Like I just know what questions to ask to get them to kind of talk, and I feel like I just understand them even if I'm not them. Like I understand them, and then I'm sure you're gonna ask this next, but the hardest one is the type A people for me to talk with. Still working on that one.
Yeah, I think that's probably. I think anyone that I've talked to is like that is the person that unless the closer is also that person, right? I think, back to what, to the initial question is like a lot of times, I was either expecting you to say like, the golden handcuffs or like the younger sibling. Cause like, you're younger obviously. So I think a lot of people like identify and can help the people that are like them, right? Or through the situations that they've personally lived themselves. Last thing I want to say on that, just to add to the younger sibling one too, is I think it's important. It doesn't like when we're saying younger sibling, I look at that more as like younger, not in age, but in mindset, right? Someone can be 45 years old and they can still be in a mindset that's like very old school. And you have to like help them understand that like, there's so much more to life than, working at a job for the next X amount of time, So dude, I think all that was extremely helpful. And, one of the things that I've always looked at is like, I think coaching is like the best way of learning. So just having you like kind of say that, hopefully you're able to kind of like get it out there and go through some of those things. So, last couple of things here. So I guess obviously you were doing the selling the shoes and stuff like that. What was like, has been your overall idea of like sales in the past? Like, were you ever someone that looked at sales in like a negative way, or was it something that you were like open to? Like, because the reason I ask that is I think there's a lot of people that listen to these episodes that they're like, I just don't want to do sales. Like that sounds silly. Like, what would you say to that person that's kind of, or two-parter? What was your initial thought of sales? And then what would you say to someone that doesn't ever want to be a salesperson?
Yeah. Again, go listen to the AIM episode. I think that'll give you some good insight. And I'll say when I was younger, which is funny to say because I'm still pretty young, but like if you told me 4 years ago that I was going to be an entrepreneur and I was going to be in sales, and I would have laughed. I would have laughed you right in your face. I would have never believed that. And I was someone who was never super good in social situations. I wasn't terrible. Like it wasn't the worst, but I never really felt super comfortable. And I didn't always know what to say. And so like watching, I don't know, The Wolf of Wall Street or something, I was just like, wow, that's crazy. I can never do that. And the truth is that you can do whatever you put your mind to. Like super cliche, but just because who you are right now isn't someone who's good at sales doesn't mean that you can't become someone who's good at sales. And it's not like sales is something where you have to like pressure people into doing it. Like remote closing especially, there's no pressure. Like sometimes you need to apply a little bit when it's needed, but the base is just like listening. And I've been good at listening. And so I think I kind of transferred that. And so naturally, I was a little bit better at like the discovery to start off. And then I kind of had to work my way into the rest of it. But it's getting super clear on what you want. And I didn't want sales just to want sales. I wanted it because it's a stepping stone and, towards my mission or towards my passion in life. And so I've said it before, but I'll say it again, like getting super clear on your vision and your dream and like what you want life to look like is going to be one of the biggest tools that you can use.
Yeah. And one thing to that too, and I agree, is like sales, you don't want to look at sales as like, that's your identity, right? Because sales really is just a stepping stone into opening up so much more opportunity to everything. Because if you don't have the fundamentals of sales, like good luck starting a business, right? Good luck doing literally anything else, right? Or, you know, you can work a job, but you're not listening to this because you want to work a job. Let's be honest. So there was one other thing I was going to say and I completely blanked. That's fine. So I'm just curious with you, you know, what's, I guess in the next 6 months, like what is your goal? Like if you thought about, you know, 6-month plan.
Yeah. So I've gone like multiple years out, but in the next 6 months, I just want to get really, really good at closing. Make it something so that if my bank account gets emptied, if my house burns down, if I lose all the clothes off my back, I wouldn't be scared because I know I have the skills that can, you know, pick me back up again. So get to that point where I have a mountain of evidence behind me that says I'm a good closer, and that's undeniable proof. So that's gonna be my goal for the next 6 months.
Cool. Yeah. What about a year?
Next year, it's more like increase my earnings and that the things. Yeah.
Sweet. Cool, man. So I think that's, I mean, we went over a lot of stuff. These will be like the last couple of things. You know, what would you say, you know, if we're coming back to like RCA, because you know, I think we didn't focus a lot on that, which is fine. You know, what would you say is like your favorite part or the most that you've gotten out of just like the community aspect of RCA?
So this might sound kind of crazy, but back when I, you know, got back into sales, I started watching all the coaching call recordings, like all the closers, a lot of the setting one. And I watched everything from like May back to December. So I watched like 6 months of coaching call recordings, and I didn't just watch them. I would like download the Zoom link. I would like clip the best parts. And so now like 8 months later, I've got this massive library of like, I don't know, 300, 400 different sales clips of like objections and discovery and like all this kind of stuff. And so I think it comes down to like being obsessed, like doing less, you know, what I was mentioning earlier. Like I decided that this is the thing. I went all in on it. And I, you know, it's not like I just do sales for 24 hours a day, but when the time I do sales, I do it really, really well. So what was your question? Like advice to people just starting?
Well, so I guess more specifically for you, your favorite parts about like the community. So you would say like the coaching call stuff.
Yeah, the coaching calls. I think the coaches are awesome. They're always excited to see you. They want what's best for you. You always leave feeling like you learned something. So I'd say that. And then even the community, you know, like the people that I've met, like a lot of younger people can probably relate to me because I've asked a lot of younger people when I say, you know, hey dude, do you have any other friends who like have the similar mindset as you? And they'll be like, well, I met this one dude online, but you know, I don't really see him. And it's like, they just feel, and so I know how you feel, and like getting in a community like this, like I've got like, I don't know, 20 different people that I can text that are in sales and like have a similar mindset to me. And so I think that's been huge for me. Like meeting people who I feel like I can identify with, and we have similar goals and similar mindsets.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because like it kind of just made like the connection in my head right now is, I mean, I might have like in person, I think I have like 4 friends. Like my circle is super small. Online, it's like hundreds of people that I like am connected with on a daily basis. But the connection in my head was I recently moved to Arkansas from Virginia, and I lived there for like 15 years, and I literally knew nobody here. And I think what helped is like I don't really feel like I don't know anyone here because like I just have like, you know, I talk to a lot of people online, and I just interact with them for like a lot amount of time. So we actually have our offsite this weekend too. So we're gonna be in Scottsdale, and that'll be fun. Okay, so last one before we do a little outro, and then I want you to give like your biggest takeaway. But what would you say to somebody that is you know, maybe they've made it to this point, and, you know, maybe they've gone through some of our stuff. They've seen, you know, Cole or me or whoever on an ad, and like they're kind of on the cusp of like, I know this RCA thing, I know remote closing, like this could like help me a ton. Like, what would you say to someone to get them off the fence and you know, make a decision?
Yeah. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's really comes down to getting super, super clear on what you want from life. Like if you're on the fence and you get super clear on what you want, and you decide that, you know, your dream is to drive a van cross country, and your dream is to spend, $200 a month and see what you can get from that, then maybe remote closing is not for you. But if you draw it all out, and like when I say get super, super clear, like it's like a list of stuff that you want, a list of stuff that you don't want. It's like being able to close your eyes and seeing exactly what your ideal life would look like, the things you would have, the way you would talk, the person that you are, the people around you, where you're at, all this kind of stuff. And then you have to decide or ask yourself, how badly do you want it? Because if you want it, but you're staying in the same situation that, like, these two things cannot coexist. Like, you've either got to choose your dreams or your current situation. And it kind of comes down to, like, I think sitting down and like laying that all out, it makes it like really clear, like, okay, if I'm not going to do this, probably just a lot easier to give up on your dreams. Like, it sounds super harsh, but like, dude, if you're not willing to take that jump, it's going to hurt a lot more to dream. So, you kind of got to decide what you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you said, they can't coexist, right? You can't, what's the saying? You can't have your cake and eat it too, right? It's like, you can't, you can't want something, but then make the decisions that are completely different, right? You can't say, I want to lose 50 pounds and then eat 7,000 calories every day, right? It doesn't come together. So I think that that's huge. So I know that was really great. I want you to think of one more thing, one just like massive golden tip, golden nugget, like someone's listened to us for an hour and some change, something that you could, and I'll give you some time because I'm gonna do the outro really quickly, but yeah, just think about that one thing that you want to leave people with. So up to this point, for those of you that are listening or watching YouTube podcast, you're probably at the point where you're like, okay, this remote closing thing, like, this sounds kind of interesting. So what I did is down below in the description on YouTube, show notes on the podcast, there's a video. It's about 45 minutes, I think, and basically breaks down the 4 steps of exactly how to get started with remote closing or appointment setting, if that's something you're wanting to do. And really, I hold nothing back in there, just going over like what remote closing is in more detail, exactly, what roles there are, how to find the roles, like pretty much break down the entire thing. And you guys can check that out down in the description and in the show notes. Full transparency, at the end of that, there is an option to work a little bit closer with us and, join the community, and we can help you and hold you accountable and get you closer to your goals. But there's no obligation to do that. Really just, again, a training, and for you to check out and start implementing some of that stuff. Bring some notes because obviously we can, we'll go over a lot of stuff there. So again, description on YouTube and podcast app in the show notes. So Camden, hopefully gave you enough time. What you got?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I've gone really big on mindset over the last couple months, and I'd say that's one of the biggest things that has helped me, right? Especially when you talked about like confidence, and like a lot of sales is like just conviction and believing in what you have and knowing that you can help someone. And so that's a little bit different than what I want to say. What I want to kind of leave people with is like, where you're at in life and what you have is exactly what you deserve. Like, if you deserve to make 10K a month, you'd already be making 10K a month. Or if you deserve to be making 30K a month, you'd already be making 30K a month. And that's not to depress people, but like, every situation exists for a reason. Even if you're someone who's making a lot of money, but all of a sudden, you just can't close anymore, like, that situation is there to teach you a lesson. And that situation is going to continue until you learn whatever lesson that your situation has to teach. So I'll let people think on that one for a little bit.
Yeah, I'll have to stew on that. But dude, thank you so much for jumping on. I think this is one of our longer episodes, which it felt like it was like 5 minutes. So thank you for jumping on and giving, jumping into the archetypes and telling the story. I think a lot of this will help people out. So again, for those of you who are listening, leave a comment down below. Let us know what you think. What was your favorite part? Leave a like if you enjoyed it, so we'll continue these episodes. Try to do about 1 a week. We were talking on the back end to potentially start doing about 2 a week. It's going to be a lot of work, but you know what? I love these episodes and some of my favorite parts out of the week. So, anyway, let us know down below. Also in the description, check out those links if you want to check out the training. See you guys in the next episode. Talk soon. Peace.